Hey guys, welcome back to Internet Tomato, where we dive deep into the dark, twisted, and epic lore of Tainted Grail. I shall be your guide to unraveling the mysteries of Avalon. Today, we are continuing our lore series by going over the Golden Age of Avalon. This video aims to provide a balanced introduction for new players and fans alike, ensuring everyone walks away with more knowledge. Keep in mind that the lore is still developing, as Tainted Grail has games planned for the future to supplement what we know, and things are somewhat subject to change. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe, or you might just get turned into a men here. So, let's get into this. Last we left off, we went over the Executor's entrance into Tuathan with the Pale Lady by their side, following Arthur's footsteps. They came across the heart of Avalon, where Arthur and the Everdweller were locked in a duel. With the Executor's help, Arthur changed the heart of Tuathan to make Avalon home for humanity by creating a picturesque Camelot. The Executor's souls merged with this creation, and they were permanently bound to Avalon as guardians. Each Executor was made with a concept. In the Discord, which I'd love for you to join, I asked, what color do you most relate to? It appears that a small plurality chose brown, but poor green didn't even get a vote. Garbo Wolf did say that his girl would have chosen green, so we have one green vote in spirit. I personally chose gray as it is my favorite color, but also the description is very much so me. Plus, Thibault and a future character that you'll meet called Sloane are my two favorite characters in the board game, and they're also both gray. Staggering back to Tainted Grail, the world felt free. Everything had been conquered, and after a hard-fought war, there could finally be peace. King Arthur felt a kinship to the Executors. However, the cutthroat nature of the court dissuaded the king from involving his friends, and even disbanded the Executors permanently. Cowlin the Wolf Rider, as far as I'm aware, is the only one given recognition, but more so because she was a warrior princess. In fact, her statue found at the Twin Sisters doesn't even mention her role as an executor. She likely was the one executor to frequent Arthur's court, but mostly since she was the leader of her tribe. Though this isn't mentioned, I like to imagine that Nazar never ceased to explore Avalon, possibly even joining the Royal Geographical Society. Duana would have been allowed to use her healing magic to care for others again, but now without the authorities condemning her as they had in the homelands. Thibault would have returned to his children to spend his final days as a father, and likely spent much time in the Red Death colony in the Dark Morass, forming a bond with Kai, Arthur's half-sister. There's little information as to what happened after the Age of Legends, but that is all I presume, given their stories. In the board game, you are given options as to how to end the campaign. Canonically, they must have decided to live in Connacht, either during the Age of Legends or for a brief time after their return. The Executors were involved in the founding of the Horns of the South, where the Twin Sisters are located. They funded 2 lighthouses and built a wharf, leaving a small detachment of troops to manage the beacons. Now, for those who played the RPG, this may be a little confusing, as it was for me originally. Chronologically, what happened at the Horns of the South is this. The fleet failed a landing here, and a small, half-done pier was built. Seawall Firstfoot was made keeper at the Twin Sisters. Seawall was experimented on and effectively killed. The Executors built the 2 lighthouses and the wharf, and finally, they left a detachment to manage it. Seawall's band of Marines, who were tasked as sheriffs, decided to join together with the detachment to form the Keepers officially. At least that's how I'd interpret it. In the next few decades, they built a barracks for the troops and aided travelers in expanding into Avalon. The Executors accomplished much in these years, but it pertained to settlements and places never mentioned. In a later geography lore series, I will go over more of their deeds. Arthur was welcomed to Tintagel with open arms. The Loyalists, led by Sir Kay, ensured that things were in order for the king's return. The nobles looked past the king's transformation, and in the annals of history, it is completely omitted. Though Arthur was glad to see the Executor's success in ending the Civil War, the war with the Fordwellers was a heavy weight upon his heart during his reign. Arthur helped found various settlements, and one would be hard-pressed to find a town that didn't claim to have had Arthur's contribution in their foundation. After a few years, the new Camelot was built, now spelled with a K. Those in Tintagel mostly joined Camelot, but others wanted to preserve their culture and founded settlements elsewhere. Thankfully, with the menhirs across all of eastern Avalon lit, the people were free to do as they pleased. The weirdness became an afterthought, and now the major concerns were the occasional surfacing of giant worms. The Round Table would go on nightly quests to slay these beasts, and Arthur would deal with regular land disputes. To the far west, Timberwall was founded, the settlement built against the Wall of Tuathan, and it rivaled Camelot in the future in trade. To the southwest, the greatest farmhold of Fireshire provided Avalon with abundant food. Lesser farmholds, such as Quinacht, Bundorca, and Falfwar, saw good harvests in the early days. Life was exceptional and much needed for humanity. Their last 5 years or so had been harsh and constantly on the verge of extinction. The survivors dictated the forming society, and many of the cultures that had previously been at odds in the homelands merged together, forming unique societies. The next few decades were Avalon's golden age. Arthur's legend grew even while living, and many of his past transgressions were overlooked. In the following generations, the people looked fondly at the Age of Legends. They ignored the suffering, starvation, and civil war, instead retelling tales of knights and famous warriors, many times embellished. The Executor's deeds morphed into Arthur's, and eventually in history, Arthur or Merlin is credited with nearly all of their accomplishments. Especially with the Executors being disbanded, many forgot that they even existed. These decades of Arthur's reign, which I am calling the Golden Age, ended with Arthur's death. Presumably, he died of old age, having lived close to a century. The people mourned his passing, as this was the end of an extraordinary age and an extraordinary man. A long procession ensued as Arthur was carried to a place he had an odd kinship with. To the north, just west of Corbenic, Arthur was buried in a tomb, in a place called the Tomb of the Order. Your head spins as you look down an imposing well, some 200 feet across and 100 deep, cut into the raw stone. Stairs spiral downwards along its walls, leading to the affluent tombs of famous knights. At the bottom, flanked by curtains of waterfalls, stands a towering statue of the one and true king, guarding his final resting place. The priests, priestesses, and knights sang ancient songs from the homelands before laying Arthur to rest. People from all over Avalon came to the Tomb of the Order to pay their respects, or made a voyage to Camelot to gaze upon Arthur's statue that dominated the construction. For the people of the day, the Age of Legends officially ended with Arthur's return, marking the war's conclusion. However, in modern Fall of Avalon games, the prevailing view, at least to me, was that the Age of Legends concluded with Arthur's death. During this time, I can only assume that Nimue, Merlin's lead apprentice, became the architect or the main contributor to Arthur's resurrection project. Using Merlin's research and the minds of the apprentices, they intended to make Arthur the once and future king by resurrecting his body during times of struggle to return a failing humanity to its old, more noble ways. Nimue and Orin, Merlin's other apprentice, spent their time in Connacht, continually gathering research. Meanwhile, another druidic circle formed, possibly with ties to Merlin. These other druids organized at Moonring, where they believed a magical nexus lay on Avalon, allowing for powerful rituals to be enhanced to reach the entirety of Avalon. Given Merlin to be Arthur's archdruid and wizard back in the day, his veneration and his apprentices to be held in high regard, we get an interesting passage describing the Moonring druids. They weren't exactly loved back in the homelands. In fact, most people of Tintagel would be relieved if they never made it to Avalon. The lore also states Arthur never liked their order. I believe this means two druidic orders came to Avalon back in the Age of Legends. One was Merlin and his apprentices, who the people beloved. The other, I will call the Order of the Moonring, was known to make sacrifices, burn people alive, and do all manner of vile acts in the name of druidic research. Most wandering, self-taught druids were equally reviled, as they typically dealt in supernatural laws with which they had no business meddling. During the Golden Age, it appears that Merlin's apprentices took a step back. They worked strictly for the king or researched, while the Order of the Moonring did as they pleased. With their control of Moonring, which enhanced their abilities, they became a powerful faction on Avalon. In certain passages, it is insinuated that the Archdruid at the Moonring held Merlin's old position, or was considered his successor. The Order of the Moonring also held shocking responsibilities that I can't imagine Arthur granting, given his disgust of their order. After Arthur's death, Camelot was led hand in hand by the Round Table and Morgane, Arthur's half-sister. Merlin's apprentices were bound to the Round Table in Arthur's absence. However, after Arthur's death, they appear to focus solely on Arthur's resurrection. My guess, given the lore, is that one of Merlin's apprentices must have joined the Moonring, bringing with him the knowledge of menhir rights. Sir Lancelot, knowing Merlin's apprentices were falling in number, decided to grant the Order of the Moonring charge to keep the menhirs burning. When a menhir across Avalon would start to fade, several Moonring druids would come and relight it. A few individuals and factions were also given the secret menhir rights, including High All-Mother priestesses. Another responsibility that seems to have been handed to the Moonring druids at this time was choosing the succeeding knights. As mentioned in the past, when a knight died, a new one would be elected to take their place. It is possible that this too was originally Merlin's responsibility, but transferred to the Order of the Moonring via the unnamed apprentice of Merlin, who became their archdruid. The Moonring archdruid would hold a meeting after a knight's death, and the druids would vote on a new knight to take their place. The elected would be given the old knight's equipment and, for all intents and purposes, would become the dead knight, taking on their name and authority. In the years following Arthur's death, his half-sister Kai became revered. Even though she had renounced the Pendragon name, everyone knew the strength that she had in her veins. She continued her non-profit work in the Dark Morass and, once the island asylum was completed, moved. Her words held more weight after Arthur was gone, and soon the Red Priests and the All-Mother priestesses that she worked with began to deify her. Kai, like her brother, was a natural-born leader, but she had no interest in being in charge. The high priests, the second pope, and the prioresses constantly sought Kai's approval. Soon, the zealous treated her words like scripture. Her authority even rivaled that of Lancelot and Morgane. Though she didn't like the deification, part of her felt like she could use this for good. The Red Priests soon labeled her as their prophet, and her words became law. Though it is not explained flatly, eventually Kai too passed away, but she was imprisoned in a sense by her followers. From what I can tell, it appears her soul is tied to the Red Church or the Island Asylum. Her followers prayed to her after her death. Perhaps similar to how the Stagfather was made corporeal through his followers' devotion, Kai was virtually made a goddess through the Red Church's faith. So in that sense, her soul was never able to rest and remains imprisoned due to the incessant call to her name. The final Eastern Avalonian developments to mention around the time of Arthur's death was the rise of the Children of Morgan and the Kingdom of Sagramore. At Crow's Nest, where the goddess Morgan made her home, she joined forces with Arthur's nephew, Mordred. He was no longer a Knight of the Round Table and attempted to forge an alliance to one day rival Camelot. Working together, the Children of Morgan were a force to be reckoned with. Lord Mordred believed that Morgan's plans for world domination somehow didn't conflict with his desire to rule in his uncle's stead as the leader of Avalon. It appears that they were tentative allies, knowing that one day they would be forced to betray each other. However, for now, they worked together as the pariahs of Avalon. In the far south, Sagramore Castle was in construction, likely under the directive of Arthur himself to be a protectorate of Connacht. King Sagramore lorded over the southern lands and had a prosperous seat of power. Given certain details that may get their own video, King Sagramore must have begun his reign during the Golden Age. His kingdom grew to such heights that it began to rival other lesser kingdoms. Like so many powerful figures on Avalon, he too feared mortality, and he eventually married Queen Sagramore. She was overly ambitious and had a desire to rule absolutely, even holding more power than the gods. In snippets while playing the RPG, we learned that Queen Sagramore feared to lose her power so much that she caused Sagramore Castle to plummet into the earth. In this underground kingdom, she could rule without fear of someone taking her power, and King Sagramore could live forever. It was so far underground that the gods couldn't reach this place. Though Sagramore will likely get its own video one day, there do appear to be some discrepancies in the writing, so I will leave Sagramore's story for another time. The last details of note are twofold, and they will also be gone into later. But since they don't pertain to Eastern Avalonian history, I will just mention it briefly. For one, the Lost Fleet. As you may recall, the Executors began their journey with the failed expedition that attempted to reconvene with the Lost Fleet, carrying thousands of civilians, troops, and lords. Unbeknownst to Eastern Avalon, the Lost Fleet survived. It was as if after the Age of Legends, the Lost Fleet became the Forgotten Fleet. With the war over, Arthur could have simply sent another expedition to find the others, and it would have been successful. I don't know why he didn't, but I assume that they just were presumed dead. Regardless, humanity survived for centuries in Western Avalon, and they found a way to survive the weirdness without menhirs. Their tale will be another lore series entirely, as it is a very long story, but as far as Eastern Avalon was concerned, they were alone. The other very, very important detail to note is that the Everdwellers' plea with the Executors at the end of the Age of Legends to give Avalon back to the Foredwellers wasn't simply unfounded. The heart of Avalon, the primordial weirdness Arthur shaped into an upside-down, messed-up Camelot, was used by the Foredwellers to operate the Soul Cycle. It was also used as a forge to create Foredweller soldiers en masse, and hence is why the Foredwellers had to end the war. Without Foredweller weavers to create or add more Foredwellers through the Soul Cycle, they couldn't have an army. With the Soul Cycle destroyed, the homelands entered a far worse apocalypse than the Red Death. Souls could no longer enter the homelands, meaning children were born dead, families could not form, and humanity became grotesque, ageless beings. Some cultures discovered solutions, but for the most part, until the soul cycle is fixed, the homelands was in a state of permanent decay. Those few nobles who returned to the homelands found the nightmare that they ran from turned into a living hell. The Avalonian population boomed after humanity became the new lords of Avalon. The old lords became recluse. The few survivors wandered Tuathan leaderless. The four dwellers who stepped outside of Tuathan's walls were hunted down by the Age of Legends veterans. In the next lore video, we will be going over what happened between the Age of Legends and the fall of Avalon. But for now, please like and subscribe, join our Discord for random polls and Tainted Grail chats. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. By the way, I wasn't intending to record this in this area, but Quirko got stuck and I can't leave unless I teleport, so I had to adapt. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Say bye, Quirko.